I hope I've got all these wires together.
All right, can we have a mic check from the Snapchat?
Yes. Lolly 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 lolly
Try to say your name and count to
Oh,
form.
Alana. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All righty.
Good placement for the clock for you.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh yeah, that's better than usual.
Yeah, that's excellent. No, you turn around here and watch me. Look at me.
All right,
Oh, yeah.
who needs to set shots? Can you guys pretend like you're in the show?
Yep. Here you go. Thank you.
Reverse.
Let's put this. Okay, Lana, this is it.
Yep.
The life of and times of Oscar Schindler.
Like Schindler, like Schindler. Schindler. Well, not Duller, just Schindler.
Schindler.
Yeah. You say it right.
I know, that's what I thought.
But I'm saying how you spell it. Yeah.
Schindler.
L-E-R.
D is silent. Schindler.
Well, no, it's still technically pronounced like Schindler.
Schindler. The D is silent.
No, it's pronounced. It's just not very out there.
You're just gonna have it your way.
No, I'm just saying how in the museum, in the Holocaust Museum, they were like Oscar Schindler.
I'll tell you what.
Are you sweating?
No, it's got oil on my face.
Your hair is so cool. It's like white and then black and then mixed. That's my hair goals.
Okay, so this is my camera, camera 6, right? Okay, let me turn around, look at me, you can talk to me,
I don't know. You've been telling me this for how old? Wait, what year is this? Like 5 years? Wait, no. Yeah, 5 years.
In spite of that, you still want to do it the way you're supposed to be done.
Ooh, colors. Yay, fun.
Don't shake the
No, shake the chair and like don't move your legs and like that. What are you doing?
is your throat clear?
Yeah.
Trying to
My hair looks really nice on the camera. It looks like glossy.
Oh, no doubt.
I put hairspray on it.
oh yeah. You move the leg.
All of mine think of it.
Hmm?
That was the old school Coke commercial.
Life and times.
Of Oscar Schindler. He was a Nazi. He was a good Nazi. He saved the Jews. Well, some Jews. About like
Well, you know,
3,000, I
you
guess.
know the whole story. Huh? Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the life and times of Oscar Schindler. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about the life and times of Oscar Schindler, Miss Alana McLaughlin. I think many of our audience, Alana, is probably familiar with you, and I don't think that there's that much we can say from up here in terms of introducing you to our audience this morning. But we do need you to give us some information in reference to your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of bringing you to us this morning. And then we'll get into some information in reference to the life and times of Oscar Schindler. I think this is a continuation of some of the things that we've already talked about on this show, and so let's do it from that perspective.
Well, as you already stated, my name is Alana McLaughlin. I am currently in 8th grade at John Early Middle. I am very involved in after-school activities, from track to cheerleading and community work, and I am a proud alumna of the Junior National Young Leaders Conference. And basically, what prompted me to want to talk about Oscar Schindler was the fact that I recently returned home from a camp called VAMPY, which is the summer program for verbally and mathematically precocious youth. And at that camp, you have a selection of classes to take. And so I chose to take a class about Nazi Germany. And a big name in Nazi Germany and in the Holocaust was Oscar Schindler. And so we watched Schindler, the famous movie Schindler's List, and we got to take a trip to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and I really started to learn and search more about Oscar Schindler, and I realized, wow, he was a really, I can't really say if he was good or not, because it all depends on how you perceive his work, but he was a prominent man, I'll tell you that. And there's so many interesting things that a lot of people don't know, and so that's what really made me grip to this topic and really want to share my information with the world.
And I think this is really a continuation of your interest in the Holocaust and some of the other things in reference to Nazi Germany. We also did one not quite recently on the rise and fall of Adolf Hitler, and you gave us quite a bit of information in reference to that. And so we anticipate, in a real sense, the same kind of information dealing with the life and times of Oscar Schindler. Let's start off by having you to give us some information over the last few minutes in this segment in terms of identifying this individual autobiographically, simply something about him, his life, and some of his works.
Well, Oscar Schindler was really solidified in Hollywood as a big name, or as a popular name, from the movie Schindler's List, which won a lot of awards. And basically, a lot of people think that they, know the whole story about Schindler from the movie, and though the movie does cover a lot of the work that he did, it doesn't cover all of it. And so basically, without giving too much away for the next segment, I want to say that Schindler, he was a Nazi, and he did hold a concentration camp. But it's not the type of camp that you would think. No, it was a labor camp, actually, excuse me. But it wasn't a bad camp, and I'll get more into that in the next segment. But he did have camps, yes, and he wasn't a part of the Nazi Party, and he wasn't squeaky clean, no, but the work he did save millions, or it saved thousands of lives at the time, and those people went on to have children, so in the end, he did save millions of lives.
And so this is a very, very important individual within the Nazi Party itself.
Yes.
But at the same time, he objected in a real sense to some of the things that the Nazis were doing, and in a real sense, so you want to talk about that and some of the other things that might be related to this. And this is really a continuation of what we've done in reference to the rise and fall of Adolf Hitler. And at one time you gave us a review over the Second World War and European dictators. And I think that Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin were all a part of that. And so we anticipate what you have to say in reference to that. And when we come back, we'll get into a discussion in reference to that. But I think that basically you've given us what we are looking for. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. God, that's over. Got out of there too fast. Almost.
We'll add it on to the next segment.
Okay, yeah, almost Well, half a minute, 30 seconds too fast.
15 seconds.
15 seconds, is that what it was?
Quarter of a minute.
Quarter of a minute. Okay, Lana, this is the second segment. And so this is still the life and times of Oscar Schindler. And this is the second segment, and you've got 8 minutes, and it's up to you to carry this thing from now on.
It was up to me.
Well, it's up to you when you came up with the title, you see. And so this is your show, and this is your title, and so this is your information, and et cetera. But if you want to recall some of the things in reference to the visit to Washington, D.C. or whatever, and et cetera, and, anything that you think might be interested in reference to that. And see, this is also being recorded. You see this information here. Yeah, so we need this. We can put this, cut this out.
Bloopers. Bloopers.
Not necessarily bloopers. This is additional information that will put people be curious in terms of how people do things and whatever, and et cetera. So,
we can make this into a separate video.
That's what I'm saying. And so we've got 8 minutes and 10 seconds. Okay, now see, okay, very good.
Let's take 10 seconds.
Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's giving us some information in reference to the life and times of Oscar Schindler. And of course, Alana, let's pick up where we left off during the first segment, and to have you to continue dealing with this information in reference to Oscar Schindler and the part that he played in reference to the Second World War as well as to the Holocaust itself.
All right, so in the first segment, I introduced myself. I'm Alana McLaughlin. I talked about my background, education, and a couple programs that I'm involved in and things of the nature. And then I talked about what made me really want to talk about this, and I said, because I went to a camp called the Summer Program for Verbally and Mathematically Precocious Youth, and I took a class on Nazi Germany, and we watched Schindler's List, which is a really famous movie. A lot of people have seen it, you've probably seen it. And after watching the movie, we went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and I learned more about Schindler, and when I got home, I started to read about him and read about all the great things that he did, and I realized, a lot of this information a lot of people don't know, and so I decided to make that the topic of the show today. Now, Oscar Schindler was a Nazi. That's a lot of people, debate on it. Some people say, no, he wasn't a Nazi. Some people say, yes, he was bad. He was a Nazi, but he wasn't your stereotypical Nazi. Now, me saying stereotypical Nazi meaning, just attached to Hitler by the hip, praise Hitler, hate the Jews, hate the Slavs and Gypsies, etc. He was not the stereotypical Nazi. What he did was he had labor camps. And that's another thing that a lot of people debate on. Some people say that he didn't, and some people say that he did. He did. What he would do is he would go to different camps, or like smaller camps, not, Auschwitz and stuff like that. He would go to smaller camps. When they were in preparation to send people to Auschwitz and things, in camps like that, he would go and he would scout out the ones who weren't very physically able, ones that would be sent to the oven or burned or, shot even before they made it to Auschwitz and things like that. He would scout them out, and he would do either two things. He would pay some of the guards on spot to take them to his labor camp where he was going to put them to work, or he would make a list and send it to the camp and be like, I want so-and-so, 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 so-and-so. And he didn't, no one knew, well, a couple people did know, but for the majority, a lot of people didn't know that he wanted these people not to make them work, but to save them, because if these people would have stayed in their original camps, they would have been killed, because in the Holocaust, they killed children and the elderly, or the non-able-bodied. So basically, if you couldn't walk or missing both your arms, it was like a death sentence. I mean, either way, it was like a death sentence, but that was like a quicker death sentence. And so he scattered out these people and he sent them to these camps where they were going to make bullets. And why I put that in the little quotation marks is because they didn't make bullets. He bought bullets from out of country, had them shipped in, and when his fellow Nazis would come and inspect the camp, he would arrange a plan with the people who were in his camp at the time, and he would say, okay, pretend like you're making a bullet, and then they would sell them to whoever, and they would be used during the war. Well, they were supposed to be making these bullets. These bullets they weren't making, they were buying. And also, I think some of the bullets didn't work, but I'm not sure on that, but I do think that some of them
That was his cover in a real sense in terms of...
Yeah, that was his disguise. And the reason he was a part of the Nazi party was he wanted to also use that as a part of his disguise because, who would think that a Nazi was trying to help the Jewish people? And so doing that, he saved thousands and thousands of lives. And basically, when the war was over and done, they were killing off people who had concentration camps for, or they were charging them for, crimes against humanity. And, Stalin, all those people and etc. They were killing off those people, or they were charging them with crimes against humanity. And most were killed, hung, shot, etc. And so Schindler, thinking that they were going to charge him with crimes against humanity, fled the country. He fled and he lived a very, very closed life. Well, at first, when the war was over, he had no money. That was a big part. So, his wife divorced him. I think it was after the war, and so it was basically on his own. At first, he would stay in houses in New York with relatives, and the people he saved would send, fruit baskets and etc. And that's what he lived off of for a time up until the fruit baskets and all that, became very scarce. And so when he stopped, living off of gifts and fruit baskets, he still lived with relatives. He had a very small life, and he came to New York and, lived with the relatives up until his death. And now when Schindler died, something very, very beautiful happened when he died. And you see this in the last part of Schindler's List. All the people that he saved, the living ones at least, came and they put a rock or a stone on top of his grave. And so I don't know if they're there now. I doubt it. I mean, they could be. But if you go there or look up a picture, you'll see all these stones across his grave, and that's a stone for each life that he saved. And you also see in the end of the movie his wife and, some of the children that he saved and things like that. And so you see all these little stones, and that's just like that's what made me cry in the end, because I usually don't cry in movies, but that part really brought me to tears because these people had such a great admiration for this man because he saved their life, their mother's lives, their children's lives, and he made so many lives today possible by the goodness of his heart.
And so in a real sense, he turned out to be a hero as far as the Holocaust was concerned. And even though he might have been suspected by the Nazis army itself of running a labor camp that would eventually lead to the death of some of these inmates, what he was doing now was in a real, saving them from death. And so for that reason, you believe that this is an important story. And as a matter of fact, I think the world believes that this is an important story and that this is one of the heroes in a real sense of the Holocaust. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm saying that Oskar Schindler made what nowadays is probably millions of lives and what in the future will be billions of lives possible by saving only, at the time, was it 3,000 people? That went on to have so many more children, and I just think it's a beautiful thing, and that he was a great, great person.
Okay, and so what we're going to do, we've got about 15 seconds before the end of this part of the program for the morning. And when we come back, we'll get into the last 10 minutes and give some speculations in reference to some of the things that you've already said in reference to that. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Okay, you be ready for this last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, what are you going to do? How are you going to deal with this? I'm going to
You said goodness gracious.
Oh.
Mine went to goodness gracious.
How am I gonna do it? I'm gonna just kind of recap for people just tuning in, like a little recap, and then talk about why I think Schlinder was a great person and things like that. You know, my commentary.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I usually do.
And you can do that for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I could do that for 20.
Well, just give me the best of your the first 10 minutes. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing all right. You're doing an excellent job.
Thanks.
Yeah, for the topic, because everything that you say about it is something that's new to me. I never saw the movie Schindler's List. I've heard of it.
You should watch it.
Yeah, I didn't know anything.
It was
about
on the other day.
It was? Well, you should be able to give us some information in reference to what you saw the other day on it.
Oh, I didn't watch it because I've already seen it. But.
Well, you that's got 10 minutes now. And you're doing an excellent job so far. But it's always that last 10 minutes that determines the quality of a show. It's the last 10 minutes, and you keep on going in reference to that. Yeah, you're doing an excellent job.
30.
This is my most difficult show for the day here, but I guess it goes automatic. See, this is the most difficult show for me today.
Why?
Determine whether or not you can deal with this. If you can. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's talking about the life and times of Oskar Schindler. And she's given us some excellent information. And Alana, let's see if we can pick up where we left off for this final segment to sort of wrap Schindler up in reference to some of the other individuals that you think played a significant role in reference to the Holocaust, as well as some of the things. For example, I think you've mentioned a lot about Anne Frank and some of the other individuals who were important in terms of the Holocaust. And so let's do it from that perspective.
All right, so if you're just tuning in the last segment that we just finished, I basically talked about who Oskar Schindler was. He was a Nazi. And he did save thousands of Jews by pulling them into his labor camp where they didn't really do labor. They made bullets, which were really bullets that Oskar bought with the money that he gained from various things. But basically, he bought these bullets, you know, sold them off thinking that they were Jewish made, but really they weren't. They were made somewhere out of the country, I believe. But basically, when the war was over, you know, Schindler, he at first fled the country thinking that he was going to be charged and killed for crimes against humanity. But he wasn't. And so he then came to New York where he stayed with relatives. You know, a lot of the people that he saved would send in fruit baskets, gifts, and foods, and that's what he lived off of, considering the fact that he was poor. And then when that started to kind of decrease, you know, he just kind of lived off of family members until his death. And then I mentioned something that not a lot of people know. If you've ever seen the movie Schindler's List, you know in the end where you see a bunch of people in a line, and it's this long line. It's, you know, there's children, elderly people, you know, middle-aged, and stuff like that. And so in the beginning, you're probably thinking, you know, what are all these people in this line for? And they're dressed kind of 80s clothes, like around the time that Schindler's List came out. And so all these people are lined up, and then they all have stones in their hands. And so you're just like, what is happening? So they all go up and place a stone on this little marker. And then you realize that the marker is Schindler's tomb. And so they're all putting these stones on there, and there are just thousands, or not thousands, but there are just so many stones, not just on it, but surrounding his grave. And these are all stones from the people that he saved. Because at the time he saved, what, 3,000 people? Think of those people, at least 100 of them had children. They had children, and they had children, and the line goes on and on. So just think of how many lives Schindler has saved. I mean, back then it was thousands, but just think now, it could probably be, if not already millions, near millions. And he just did so many great things for so many people, and you can't repay someone for saving your life. You know, you're in this thing called a life debt. And so basically they showed their gratitude by placing these stones on there. And I thought that was a beautiful part of Schindler's List that was very, very well persecuted. And that really brought me to tears, you know. I don't usually cry at movies, and that's why I was saying that it was so crazy for me to just sit there and just bawl my eyes out the whole movie.
And so in a real sense, Alana, I think we've talked about Anne Frank and Oskar Schindler and whatever. And so what you're saying is, in spite of all of the horrors of the Holocaust and the deprivation of the Jewish population and et cetera, there were efforts on the part of individuals like Anne Frank and Schindler to help alleviate some of the suffering. And it's important to recognize these individuals, because somehow we can get caught up in the horrors of the Holocaust and believe that everybody, all Nazis, were in favor of killing all the Jews and et cetera. And here you've got an example. Now it's only one example, and certainly that might not have been common among all of the Nazis and et cetera. But nevertheless, this was an individual who's worthy of being remembered in terms of having that kind of information, that kind of memory. Is that what we're saying? Yes,
and I think that nowadays we focus, like in schools, we teach about Adolf Hitler and Stalin and the bad part of, you know, European dictators and things like that, but we don't focus on the fact that through all this horror, there were little rays of light, like Oskar Schindler, who showed us that looks are deceiving. Because if you just looked at Oskar Schindler, you would think that he was a trigger-happy, money-craving, drunky Nazi. And that's basically what he was, but he wasn't, you know, trigger-happy.
That was his persona.
That was his persona. And that was his costume, because strip away all the things that you would see when he was out, you know, having parties and etc. There was a man on the inside. And at the end of the war, when he was freeing all his, you know, people before he fled, he cried. And he broke down and cried, and then, you know, a bunch of people were coming up and they were hugging him, and then somebody asked, well, why are you crying? And he said, because I didn't save enough people. And, you know, I'm tearing up now just thinking about that, because this man, so many people thought so low of him, yet he broke down and cried in front of thousands of people because he didn't feel that he had saved enough people. Tell me this. I mean, there were probably other Nazis, but what other Nazi can you name that broke down at the end of the war and cried because he didn't save enough people? And I just think that it takes a lot of courage to be able to just do something like that. He just, you know, threw his disguise off and just, you know, basically said it out that I am upset because I feel as if I didn't do enough. They were like, you saved so many people, and, you know, and it's okay. And it was, because I don't think at the time he was thinking that, just think about the bloodlines that you're saving. Their ancestors, well, modern day people can always think back on their ancestors and just think, wow, you know, my ancestor was saved by Schindler. And so basically, that's another really gripping part of the movie that I cried at. And honestly, I just think that people, before judging, never judge a book by its cover, basically, because you don't know what's on the inside, and that's how Schindler basically got away with saving the Jews, because no one thought to really look at his personality. They just decided, you know, hey, he's a Nazi, he's automatically going to kill all the Jews.
And so in a real sense, these are some of the heroes, in a real sense, if we were to identify some individuals within the Nazi Party during the period, that these are, he was one of the heroes, just as Anne Frank was another of the heroes, even though she didn't recognize at that time that she would eventually be who she was. But nevertheless, it's important. Do you think that many of the people that are in your class, or you say you're in the 8th grade now, do you think that many of the people that are in your class is aware of this, or conscious of some of the things that we're talking about here today? And if so, what are they doing? And if not, well, what should they do?
You know, I was reading a book called, I think it was called Schindler's List, and it was just talking about, it was real stories from the people that he saved. and this book was published after his death, I believe. And a lot of people were like, what are you reading about? And I would say Oscar Schindler, and like the majority were like, who? And I was like, well, I mean, I wouldn't expect a lot of them to know, because I mean, we're like 12 through 14, and so a great majority probably don't even watch like 80s movies and stuff, and that's when Schindler's List came out, so I didn't really think too much of it. But then I did think, we should get our youth more aware of things like this, because not knowing, if you don't know history, you're bound to repeat it. And so we should know about, the Holocaust, and know about, European dictators. And they do talk about European dictators in, social studies class, but I think that stops at 6th grade now, and you do U.S. history. And, that the Holocaust wasn't U.S. history, because the U.S. was kind of blind to the Holocaust, because we only saw pictures of what we were allowed to see. And when, people from the Red Cross and stuff would come to Nazi Germany to take pictures of the Holocaust, they would clean it up and make it look like it's just nice little labor camps and stuff like that, when really that was never the case. That was never, ever the case. And so I think that we should get our youth more aware of what happened in our past, and just never forget the past, because if we forget it, I mean, it says in the Bible, you are my witnesses. And it also says that inscribed on the outside of the Holocaust Museum. But I think that we bear as witness to these people, and we need to know.
Very good. And of course, Lord, let me thank you. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you,
and good morning.
Earlier.
Can you just say your name and count to 10, please?
Big pardon? Yeah, Lewis V. Baldwin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and we have with us this morning to talk about the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Dr. Lewis Baldwin. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, you've been with us on many occasions. Every time I come with you, I have to say that because people said, didn't I see him last week with you? And I said, yeah, because he's got all of the information that we want. And I think that what we are going to talk about this morning, dealing with the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, is very important in view of what is going on in politics and during the political season at this time. But Dr. Baldwin, let's go back further than this period. Let's look at the period immediately after slavery, when Africans were emancipated, and start from there and talk about not only the 15th Amendment, but say something about the 13th and the 14th Amendment to the Constitution and how important these amendments are.
Yeah, that's very important in terms of giving us some understanding of where we are today. The 13th Amendment in 1865 ended slavery. And not only in the rebel states, but throughout the United States. The Emancipation Proclamation simply ended slavery in the rebel states. But when you get the 13th Amendment in 1865, it ends slavery throughout the United States. Then you get the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed citizenship to Africans, and the 15th Amendment, which was ratified in February 1870, really gave Africans the right to vote. Now the problem is that voting was never up to the levels that it should have been between the period of 1870 up to 1865. We had to have the Voting Rights Act in 1865 to guarantee that most people of African descent in this country would have the right to vote and would be able to exercise that right. So with the 15th Amendment, 1870, a very important landmark in our history. Blacks were given the right to vote, but they were never able to vote up to the levels that they should have voted. And we had to wait, of course, until the Civil Rights Act, or the Voting Rights Act, rather, of 1965, which, as you well know, was signed into law on August 6, 1965 by President Lyndon B. Johnson. And that law, of course, did essentially three things. Number one, it guaranteed the right to vote. Number two, it created a federal authority to register voters in areas, jurisdictions where local officials had interfered with the right to register and vote. And thirdly, it restricted literacy tests and other examinations that were essentially based on racial discrimination, preventing people from voting. So that was a landmark. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a landmark achievement in the struggle for civil rights and also in the struggle for inclusive participatory democracy. It transformed the South in ways that the 15th Amendment, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments did not transform the South to the extent that you get with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, where blacks are finally given an opportunity to participate completely in the civic life of the South.
And so in a real sense, Dr. Baldwin, we're talking about the so-called Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendments to the Constitution playing a very, very significant role. Now, I think that many of our members of our audience might not be familiar with some of the efforts used by certain elements in the southern parts of the United States in the 1870s to keep Africans from participating in the suffrage. Now we're all familiar with violence, the Ku Klux Klan, and etc. But what were some of the things that were used at that time to sort of diminish the participation of black participation in politics?
The states' rights argument was quite prominent during that time. That is, that states should have the right to decide who exercised the ballot. But Southerners came up with a number of different tactics. They used the grandfather clause, which essentially argued that your father or grandfather had to have the right to vote and had to have property and education, that kind of thing. They came up with literacy tests, the poll tax to prevent Africans from voting in that time. There were also residential requirements, property requirements that were used to prevent Africans from voting. And of course, the states' rights argument was prominent in this opposition to black voting rights in that period. And of course, we get the same thing in the last decade with Republicans who are going back to the states' rights argument.
Okay, let's have a break here, Dr. Baldwin, then we'll pick up at this moment. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Because the 50th anniversary is important, but why is that important? Because we've got people in all these state legislations, even the state of Tennessee, passing laws that somehow restrict and prohibit people from participating.
Voter ID laws, relocated polling places,
the whole thing.
Early voting cut out.
That's right. That's the same thing. Some of the violence that was practiced by the early people in the 1870s.
Oh, absolutely.
To keep black folks from, Klan and all of that,
I didn't really get through that. And,
that's
what John Hope Franklin said by 1898, blacks were completely disenfranchised.
That's right.
In the South.
That's what bring all that information. I know you got that information. I know you got it on that list. I don't have to be doing that list. You got credibility. You don't have no list in here. Okay, very good. This is 8 minutes, and so we'll just pick up and sort of look at some of the opposition to black folks. Because that's the thing, And you might say something about, in spite of this opposition, some of these black folks did get a chance to get to Congress and et cetera.
Oh, absolutely. John Lewis and the efforts he's making to renew and upgrade the Voting Rights Act.
So. Yes, sir. Because it's this is going fast. This is 8 minutes coming to 9. Thank you and welcome back to the show this morning. The topic is the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And Dr. Baldwin has given us some information in reference to the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendments to the Constitution that eventually led Africans to participate in the suffrage. Let's look back, Dr. Baldwin. I think you mentioned the Voting Rights Act of 1870. And we find that in many instances there was widespread opposition in the South in reference to this. And there was what kind of reaction division that you find in the southern parts
Yes,
of the United States.
with the ratification of the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, which guaranteed the right to vote irrespective of race, color, or previous conditions of servitude. Blacks got the right to vote, and we know there was a tremendous white backlash in the South with the rise of the Ku Klux Klan in late 1860s, white mob groups that emerged, and the great historian John Hope Franklin says that by 1898, blacks in the South had been almost completely disenfranchised because violence was used also, not only the grandfather clauses, poll taxes, restrictions in terms of residency and property rights, but also violence was used to intimidate black voters and to eliminate the black voting processes in the South. And this is why by 1898 you have blacks almost completely disenfranchised in the South. So you don't have the exercise of the ballot very much at all in black communities in the South between 1898 up to 1965, when you get the signing of the Voting Rights Act into law by President Johnson.
And so this played a very, very significant role in the terms of helping to elevate the African out of the situation that many of them found themselves in because of segregation and some of the other things associated with it.
Absolutely. With the Voting Rights Act of 1965, you really get a kind of transformation from what was called the Old South to what Martin Luther King Jr. and others called the New South. The New South was that South that respected inclusive participatory democracy, which of course included the right to vote. That's why Dr. King felt that the Voting Rights Act was such a landmark achievement in the civil rights struggle, because he felt that in order to have economic power, you have to have political power. In other words, political power is a path to economic power. This is why it was so important for Dr. King, Julian Bond, who recently passed away, and others who were actively involved in the struggle for voting rights.
And so also I think, Dr. Baldwin, Africans started to appear in Congress for the first time during this period between 1870 and 1898.
Exactly.
And that played a significant role in reference to bringing black folks out to vote.
Exactly. In some of the state legislatures, meaning South Carolina, for an example, blacks outnumbered whites. So for the first time, you get people who were once slaves having the right to vote, having the right to hold political office. And of course, that was very intimidating to white Southerners at that time. So they resorted to states' rights tactics, arguments to sort of reinforce or reclaim or reinstate traditions of white supremacy. And of course, we see that going on today with these new voter ID laws. Some 34 states today have voter ID laws, some of which are very strict. They require government or state-issued voter IDs. Take Texas, for an example, which has one of the strictest voter ID laws. There, they only respect driver's license, military IDs, passports, gun licenses, but they don't respect student IDs. So what you have now today is a retreat to what happened in the past, going back to these states' rights arguments, arguing that states have the right to determine who are qualified to vote, that there's no need for federal oversight. And of course, that results from a Supreme Court decision in 2013, which essentially struck down, I think, Part 4 of the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act rather, which said that there had to be some permission from the federal government, some pre-clearance through the federal government before states could make any changes in their laws or regulations with respect to registration, voting, elections. And so what we have today is a revisitation of many of the same kinds of arguments that existed in the late 19th century.
And in other words, when folks, excuse me, talked about the grandfather clause in the 1870s after the passage of the act in 1870, today they no longer talk about the grandfather clause, but they come up with the system that means that you have to have a passport in order to
a government issued ID or state issued ID. What they're doing also, they're relocating polling places. They are also cutting early voting days. You know, black churches for a long time, since 1965, have devoted Sundays to days of registration. They have what they call souls to the polls missions. And of course, with the cutting of early voting days, that has been essentially eliminated. So what you have here, of course, are voting rights restrictions that have been put into place that mainly affects minorities, the elderly, students, and that's really a revisitation of what we've seen in earlier days.
It's a repeat of the same kind of laws. It might not say that you have to, in order for you to vote, your grandfather has to vote, but if you come up with a gun restriction, I mean, voting only if you have
voting ID, restrictions.
Those are the same restrictions then and restrictions there. Receive the same kind of support.
Yeah, right. The only difference is that in the late 19th century and the early part of the 20th century, restrictions were clearly based on race. Now you have a more subtle approach to voter restriction and voter suppression, and it's mainly led by people in the Republican Party, unfortunately. You have today in 2015 what is called the Voter Rights Amendment Act put forth by Democrats, and what they want to do is to upgrade the Voting Rights Act to reinstate this emphasis on what? Federal oversight and the need for states to get pre-clearance from the federal government before they make changes in voting.
With an effort of trying to what? Open the franchise for all groups, minorities or whatever.
And to expand it.
And expand it. Very
exactly.
Good. Okay, and of course what we're going to do, we're going to take this second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.
President Obama has recently spoken to that, and so we can talk about where we're going from here.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's very good. Yeah, that's what we want. Yeah, this is it. This is good information. It's just restating some information. There's nothing new in reference to this. It's just the same thing. You know, the idea is to eliminate.
Unfortunately, it's the same old story.
Same old story. Instead of trying to expand political opportunities, people are concerned about what? Limiting opportunities, et cetera, led in a real sense by some very, very important individuals.
It's a threat to democracy.
It is.
We are a democratic society.
That's right. We no longer can be a democratic society if folks can't vote. See, and that's important too. And people might not think that much about that, but that's important to know, and to know that we're still fighting the same battles. You see,
same old battles, man.
Yeah, this is excellent information, Dr. Baldwin. Appreciate it. Go and throw it at us, man. That's what we need. We need to hear it. 50 years ago, and the same thing, and the same thing.
I remember it.
That's right. Yeah. I remember it too. I remember when we the passage of the poll tax. I used to go down and write up poll taxes for black folks as a freshman and even in college in my freshman year. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Lewis Baldwin from Vanderbilt University, and the topic is the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And Dr. Baldwin, let's use this final 10 minutes of this show to give you an opportunity to expand in a real sense upon some of the issues dealing with the suffrage. As a matter of fact, I think the last time you were with us, we talked about the contemporary Black Lives Matter movement, and now that movement has become widespread. The knowledge of it has become widespread throughout the United States. And so, if you want to bring in some additional information in reference to that and the voting rights, just feel free to deal with that kind of information.
And it's interesting that you would bring that up, because many who are fighting for expanded voting rights are also bringing in this Black Lives Matter dimension, and that movement too is becoming a part of the voting rights movement, because it all has to do with respect for the sanctity, the sacredness, the dignity and worth of Black life. That is, we need to have God-given rights that all other citizens have. That is the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the right to vote as well. So what we are seeing today, among Democrats especially, is a call for the upgrading of the Voting Rights Act to reinstate this principle of pre-clearance, to make sure that there's some federal oversight over voting practices in states that have a history of discrimination. I mentioned before the break that Democrats have come up with the Voting Rights Amendment Act of 2015, which is about reinstating federal oversight. Some are saying that we need that oversight in 13 states, mostly in the South, that have a history of discrimination. President Obama had said that September 22nd, 2015 will be National Voter Registration Day. So he too is calling for an upgrading of the Voting Rights Act so that states won't have complete freedom in determining who should vote, or in determining what procedures should be used in the processes of registration, of voting, and election. So I think these are important developments, and if you ask me, I would say in the 2016 presidential election, voting rights will be a very prominent issue, because Republicans have essentially lined up against what's going on with the Democrats in terms of this push for more federal oversight over voting practices and registration procedures in the South.
And so in a real sense, excuse me, Dr. Baldwin, that the right to vote is so essential to democracy that if a person is eliminated or disfranchised in terms of voting, then he has no real participation in the process of government itself.
Exactly. And what you see with the voter ID laws and other restrictions are really attempts at voter suppression. And we noticed in the 2014 congressional elections a decline in Black voting, a decline in other areas of voting, such as the elderly. Certain demographics are being what? Are being excluded by these rigid, strict ID laws passed by the state of Texas and other states. So what we have here, as you said, of course, is a threat to participatory democracy. This country was founded on the principles of participatory democracy. And when you deny people the right to vote, or you come up with restrictions to the right to vote, then you are really what? You're really threatening the very processes of participatory democracy.
And when some folks are denied the right to vote, others are discouraged from voting because they now believe that it really does not matter about voting because, quote, their vote will not, what, count.
Exactly. And some elderly people have already complained. They've spent 5 hours trying to get, as much as 5 hours trying to get a voter ID. There are problems with traveling. There are problems with having the resources to get access to the ballot. So what we have today is really a threat to democracy in this country. And I think President Obama, Congressman John Lewis, who was very much involved in the voting rights struggle in Selma, Alabama in 1965, what they are telling us is that we need to what? Upgrade the Voting Rights Act and continue to renew it because it is much needed in a society in which there are still patterns of discrimination, personal and institutional.
Very good. Dr. Baldwin, we've got about 4 minutes here. What I'd like to do with this time is to look at some of the activities that are going on now in the various states. For example, I think Oregon has almost universal suffrage in a real sense through the states, which is to say that people in Oregon, once they reach, I think this is what I know about the law, once they reach the age of 18, they are automatically registered to vote. And so there's a larger percentage of Americans or people from Oregon that are involved in the political process in that state. Do you think that that would be efficient in terms of allowing that? Because sometimes I think ago, people talked about allowing registration through the post office, registration through the internet, and there are all ways in which people can register now if we are concerned with trying to expand the whole operation of democracy in the United States.
Yes, I think with the Oregon statutes or laws can serve as a model for the nation, because after all, we're trying to expand the reach of democracy. Interestingly enough, in states like North Carolina, there used to be pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds. That has been cut out. So what we need to do is to put in place the kinds of guidelines that would encourage people to register to vote. But what you see with these voter restriction, ID laws, and other statutes or principles put in place is an effort to really restrict, to obstruct, to suppress
and a real
voting. And I think you're right. What is happening in Oregon, and of course it is this exception more than the rule, needs to be a model for the nation if we are interested in what? In increasing voting rights, which are, of course, at the core of any participatory democracy.
That's right, and we can't have a democracy if we say the people are not participating in it, and if the people become discouraged in terms of participating, and if they're driven away from the polls, then it's difficult to argue that we have a democratic situation.
That's right. I'm rather concerned about 2016, the presidential election, because I think many of these ID laws, and they're in place, as I said, in 34 states, some of them very strict, very rigid, is that these laws will have an impact on the presidential election. And that would be very unfortunate, because, you know, we want to make sure that our presidents are democratically elected, that we have the broadest possible base of democracy. When we are talking about presidential elections. And now that, of course, is threatened by many of the laws we see put on the books in certain states today.
And do you think the current effort on the part of Congress to deal with the Voting Rights Act, do you think that that might bring in more folks?
Yes, I think, and it's an effort put forth by Democrats, essentially. On the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act on August 6th, really, Democrats got together and they stated as a body their interest in and efforts to what? To expand and upgrade the Voting Rights Act. Republicans have been noticeably absent from that effort, and that's rather unfortunate. It has to be a bipartisan effort. In the past, when the Voting Rights Act has been renewed, it's been renewed by bipartisan efforts. And we don't see that going on today. It's essentially a Democrat versus Republican scenario.
And therefore, folks who try to keep people from voting are really working against the principles of what this country is supposed to stand for, principles of democracy.
It's at the very core of our democracy. And unfortunately, we are having to revisit some of the same states' rights arguments, some of the same tactics that we used to prevent people from voting in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
And so, Dr. Baldwin, over the last few seconds, let me thank you for bringing by that excellent information and reminding us once again of the importance of the suffrage. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week to another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning. Tennessee, Tennessee prison system in crisis.
Okay.
Is
Yeah.
that what we want to do, Reverend Alexander?
Sir.
Call it the Tennessee prison system in crisis.
That sounds good.
Because there's been a lot of information that's been written about that and et cetera. You know how to handle that? Can you handle that?
I can handle it.
Can you handle that, Reverend?
Yeah, we can handle
He
it.
can definitely handle it.
And so what we'll do, we'll call this
Tennessee prison system in crisis.
I think we ought to call it that. Okay. The Tennessee prison system in crisis. Okay, and then we'll go through some statements in reference to background and education and et cetera, perhaps during the first 3 minutes of this first part of this show. And then the second 3 minutes, which is to say we'll give you an opportunity to talk about your background, education, et cetera, a minute and a half or whatever, give you an opportunity to do the same.
Wow, this don't need to be in my pocket.
And then we'll be over that first 6 minute segment.
Okay.
Then we'll get into, for the next 8 minutes, that 8 minute segment, we'll get into a system in crisis.
Okay.
And then the two of you can deal with that from whatever perspective that you want to deal with it.
Okay.
And we'll have a chance, you know, once we deal with the background education, that 6 minute segment, we'll have a chance to break
Right.
during that segment and come back for 8 minutes dealing with that. And then during that 10 minute, that third segment, we'll have Ben and Ndume to come in and talk about.
That sounds great. Kind of their experience.
And I think both of those were involved in death sentence.
Well, Ndume was, Ben spent 22 years, last night. Right.
And Ndume was on death row.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll have 10 minutes to deal with them. And so now we'll simply deal with the system in crisis.
Okay.
That sounds great.
Reverend Alexander, is that right?
That sounds good.
Quiet on the set.
Okay, so we're going to get the two of you during this last 10 minutes.
Say your name and count to 10.
Okay.
Jeannie
We're gonna do
Alexander.
with them
1, 2, 3,
6 minutes,
4,
8 minutes.
5.
Louder. Act like you're talking to
Prison
Dr.
system
Haney.
in crisis.
Jeannie Alexander.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4,
And,
5, 6, 7,
we'll
8,
do
9,
with
10.
the two of you dealing with
That work?
Yep. Thank you.
some
bet.
information about the prison system. Y'all ought to be familiar with that. You see, you ought to be able to give us 10 minutes. Man, you think you can give us 10 minutes in reference to what went on out there?
Oh, maybe.
Daily routine.
And all that stuff like
just
that.
about what, you know, about things that you think folks need to know in reference to the daily activities and et cetera, anything like that.
Life, what's it, a day in the life of an inmate. Huh?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
I know they both have a
So we're going to call this the Tennessee prison system in crisis.
And the violence, but they can talk about too, some of the violence that takes place in the system that's not reported, that they've seen because of the spirit of time they've been in there.
After we get through this second segment, then y'all give them your chairs.
Yeah.
Y'all stand around and give us some information about what they think, what you think that they ought to talk about as well.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yep, I got you.
Help us run this. And I think that at the end, we ought to be able to get all this information in with these two segments.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay.
You look well. You
Ma'am,
look about
God
10
has been
years
good
younger
to
every
me.
time I see you. What are you doing? That is a good
Pastor
thing.
Walker knows he's been
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Ain't he been good?
Yes, sir.
I always say that.
Yes, sir.
You better watch it. I might do it. What is it, the 23rd Psalm? The Lord is my shepherd.
That's
He
you.
is. He really is. He really, once you come to recognize that a lot of things can be accomplished through that. We call it Tennessee prison system in crisis.
Can you be surprised how many people that could talk and say something, but are afraid?
I contacted a number of people for the show who are like working now on the inside, and some who have quit, and people are afraid. You know.
Well, I don't want to say anything that would jeodyze anybody. I mean,
I'm not
we
going to
could-
use anyone's name,
Yeah, we
but I
just-
think it's
just
safe to say that there are people who at least contacted my organization who currently work with the department who are looking for guidance and help and are afraid for their jobs.
Okay. And so we'll have this first 6 minutes, introduction, you know, background, education, et cetera. Then we'll do that for 6 minutes, a couple of minutes for the two of you, and then we'll take that break and we'll come back for 8 minutes and talk about system in crisis, okay? And then we'll vacate the seat and we'll bring those two over for 10 minutes and we'll be able to deal with the show today, okay?
What time do we get started?
In a couple minutes, they're queuing up the servers to roll.
We actually got out here early.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, get out here. We've got 2 more to do after this.
Oh, yeah.
30 seconds
We have
out.
done 2 this morning.
We're almost there.
Yeah, we did one on Alana came through this morning and talked about, out of all things, the life and times of Oscar Schindler. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the Tennessee prison system in crisis, and we're fortunate to have with us to talk about some of the issues dealing with the Tennessee prison system, Pastor Kay Walker, as well as Reverend Jeannie. How did I do that? Huh? Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the Tennessee prison system in crises, and we're fortunate to have with us to talk about some of the issues dealing with the Tennessee prison system, Pastor Kay Walker and Reverend Jeannie Alexander. And we'll use this part. Did I do it right this time? I got it right that time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Reverend Alexander. And so, Pastor Walker, let's start off by having you to give us some information in reference to your background, your education, and some other things. And Reverend Alexander will give us similar information in reference to her background. And then we'll have the second segment to get into some of the issues dealing with the Tennessee prison system. And we're off now. Go on.
All right. Well, I'm Pastor Kelvin Walker, born and raised right here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm native Nashvilleian. Dr. Haney, first of all, thank you for allowing the opportunity to be on your show. Educated in public school systems here in Tennessee up until a certain point. Was not a desirable character coming up young as a young male in this country, and got in a lot of trouble and stuff like that. Eventually got kicked out of the public school system. But from there I went into the military, went into the Navy, got out of the Navy, got a GED, spent some time at Tennessee State University studying clothing and textile. I wanted to be a fashion designer. And from there, of course, all during that time, I was on drugs, and I got strung out on drugs, and ended up, that blew my, my college pursuit right there. Ended up incarcerated in Tennessee State prison system. Did some college studies in there through Tribeca East Campus Prison Program, up until good old President Reagan cut out the veterans benefits and stuff like that, and kind of squashed and killed the program for a lot of us that was pursuing degrees while incarcerated. But that's who I am, and I'm here today to talk about some things that I think that are very important.
Very good. Reverend Alexander.
Dr. Haney, thank you for inviting us back. I am the director for No Exceptions Prison Collective, which is a prison advocacy organization. We work on behalf of prisoners and their families. So I'm an attorney, but I'm also a pastor. And prior to that, I was the head chaplain at River Bend Maximum Security Institution. And it was during that time when my eyes were really opened about the realities of mass incarceration in this country, and about the fact that none of us can claim to be innocent bystanders at this point. We know what's going on. The information is out there. And so when I resigned a year ago, I left with the intention of starting No Exceptions and working with a collective board that includes outsiders. We have a lot of attorneys in our collective, a lot of pastors and professors, but then also insiders. So in order, I think, to have integrity, is you have to continue to working with prisoners and with their families. And typically, we stay focused on very specific issues in the prison system. But recently, there's been so much buzz and noise and coverage, as you well know, about the prison system currently and about the current administration, that we've received so many calls and so many letters, not just from insiders, but from employees, from families of prisoners, that we become involved in other issues that are immediate and very timely right now, having to do with the well-being of those who work in the prisons and those who live in the prison.
And so this would include some of the issues, Pastor, that you think are important in terms of this crisis that we talk about.
Oh, without a doubt. You know, one of the things I've always said in a lot of previous shows that we've done here on Comments, Dr. Haney, is that one of my purposes is to change the signal that's being from the prison system back into society. Because there's this process that takes place where we'll follow the individual from the crime scene throughout the judicial process all the way to the gate or to the walls of the prison system. And from there, we drop them off and not realizing that individual pursues life while incarcerated. And of course, at some point, many of them are returning back into society, but the prison system is sending a signal out that suggests to society that everybody's in there is low down, dirty, they're just scum of the earth, they're no good. Even though the purpose of incarceration is for rehabilitation and punishment, but they send a signal out that says these people never change. And so therefore they use that to justify all the methods and means that they use against people to basically dehumanize people that are incarcerated in the prison system, and create all these systems that are in place that really sends an individual back into society if that individual does not take the initiative to work on themselves, worse off than they were in many cases when they went in there. You know, and I say that because you take, for example, you lock a man in a cage for 23 hours out of a 24-hour